Many years ago, in a quiet English town called Millbrook, 8-year-old Emma sat on the cold stone steps of Sunshine Children's Home. The rain fell softly round her as she held her only possession, a small, worn teddy bear named Buttons. Her small fingers gripped the bear tightly, as if holding onto the last piece of her old life. Her parents, James and Mary, had brought her here just an hour ago. They were young, barely 20, and struggling with problems too big for them to handle. Emma remembered how her father's hands shook as he carried her small suitcase to the door. Her mother's face was red and puffy from crying. With tears in their eyes, they had whispered, "We're sorry, Emma. We love you, but we can't take care of you right now." Emma watched their old blue car disappear into the darkness. The red tail lights grew smaller and smaller until they were just tiny dots. And then they were gone completely. She didn't understand why Mummy and Daddy had to leave her behind. Just that morning, she had been eating breakfast at their small kitchen table. Now, she was sitting on strange steps in front of a big, unfamiliar building. The kind lady from Children's Home, Mrs. Roberts, gently took her hand. She was a plump woman with grey hair and gentle brown eyes that reminded Emma of her grandmother's. "Come inside, dear," Mrs. Roberts said with a warm smile. "You're safe here. We'll take good care of you." But Emma felt anything but safe. She felt lost, confused, and very much alone. The building was much bigger than her family's tiny flat. There were long hallways with many doors, and she could hear the voices of other children somewhere inside. Everything smelled different, like cleaning soap and something she couldn't identify. It wasn't the familiar smell of her mother's cooking or her father's aftershave. Mrs. Roberts showed Emma to a small room with 2 beds. "This is where you'll sleep," she explained kindly. "Your roommate is Lucy. She's 9 years old and very friendly. She'll help you feel at home." But Emma couldn't imagine ever feeling at home here. Home was the little flat where her parents tucked her into bed every night and read her stories. That first night, Emma lay in the strange bed staring at the ceiling. The sheets were clean but rough. Not soft like the ones at home. Lucy tried to talk to her, asking about her teddy bear and where she came from. But Emma could barely speak. She made a quiet promise to herself as she hugged Buttons close to her chest. "If I ever grow up to help people," she whispered so quietly that even Lucy couldn't hear, "I'll make sure no child ever feels this scared and alone." The next few days passed like a blur. Emma met the other children at Sunshine Home. There was Tommy, who was 6 and had been there for 2 years. There was Sarah, who was 10 and helped the younger kids with their homework. There was little Michael, who was only 4 and still cried for his mummy every night. The other children at Sunshine Home were kind, and the staff did their best to make everyone feel loved. But Emma carried a deep sadness in her heart that seemed to grow heavier each day. Every morning, Emma would wake up hoping it had all been a bad dream. She would look round the room, expecting to see her own bedroom with the yellow wallpaper and her collection of books on the shelf. But she always saw the same white walls and the same unfamiliar furniture. She often stood by the big window in the main room, hoping to see that blue car return. She would press her nose against the glass and watch every car that drove down the street, her heart jumping whenever she saw anything blue. Mrs. Roberts noticed Emma's sadness and tried to help. She would sit with Emma during meals and encourage her to eat. She would read stories to the children in the evening, always making sure Emma was included. She even let Emma help in the kitchen sometimes, thinking that staying busy might help the little girl feel better. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The leaves on the trees outside changed from green to yellow to brown, and then they fell to the ground. Emma learned the routines of the children's home. Breakfast at 7 o'clock, lessons with the volunteer teachers in the morning, lunch at noon, playtime in the afternoon, dinner at 6, and bedtime at 8. Slowly, very slowly, Emma began to accept that her parents weren't coming back, but she held onto her promise and the belief that somehow, someday, things would get better. She started to talk more with the other children. She began to eat her meals without Mrs. Roberts having to encourage her. She even smiled sometimes when Tommy told funny jokes or when little Michael finally learned to tie his shoes. Deep inside, the sadness was still there, but Emma was learning to carry it while still finding small moments of happiness at night. She would still whisper to Buttons about her promise to help other children someday. It was a small light of hope in her heart that kept her going through each difficult day. As the years passed, Emma grew from a sad little girl into a determined young woman. The promise she had made to her teddy bear Buttons all those years ago never left her mind. She studied hard at school, knowing that education was her path to a better life. While other children played after school, Emma would sit in the library at Sunshine Children's Home, reading every book she could find. Her teachers at the local school quickly noticed something special about Emma. She always completed her homework perfectly and asked thoughtful questions in class. She was quiet but intelligent, and she seemed to understand things that other children her age found difficult. Her favorite teacher, Mr. Thompson, was a kind man with a grey beard who taught mathematics and science. One day, when Emma was 16, Mr. Thompson asked her to stay after class. Emma worried she had done something wrong, but his smile told her otherwise. "You have a gift, Emma," he said, looking at her test papers. "Don't let your past hold you back from your future. You could go to university if you work hard enough." Emma never forgot those words. They became like a light guiding her through the difficult times. She studied even harder, often reading by lamplight long after the other children had gone to sleep. Mrs. Roberts, who still worked at the children's home, would sometimes find Emma asleep at her desk with books scattered round her when Emma turned 18. Mr. Thompson helped her apply for scholarships to university. She wrote essays about her dreams of helping children and her experiences growing up without parents. Her hard work paid off when she received a letter saying she had won a full scholarship to study me. The scene at a university in London. The day Emma left Millbrook for university was both exciting and scary. She packed her few belongings, including Buttons, who was now very old and worn. Mrs. Roberts hugged her tightly at the train station. "We're so proud of you, dear," she said with tears in her eyes. "You're going to do wonderful things." University life was harder than Emma had expected. She lived in a small room in a student building, and everything was expensive. While other students had family support and money from home, Emma had to find ways to pay for her food, books, and other needs. She found a job cleaning offices at night, working from 10 in the evening until 3 in the morning. Then she would go back to her room, sleep for a few hours, and attend classes during the day. Emma also tutored younger students to earn extra money. She would help them with mathematics and science, remembering how Mr. Thompson had helped her. Some days she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open during lectures, but she never gave up. She would think about the promise she had made as a scared 8-year-old, and it gave her strength to continue. The other students sometimes invited Emma to parties or social events, but she rarely had time to join them. She was always either studying, working, or sleeping. Some students felt sorry for her, but Emma didn't want their pity. She had learned to be independent and strong. Emma's experiences had given her something special that the other students didn't have. a deep understanding of what it meant to struggle. When she did her medical training in hospitals, she was particularly drawn to helping children who came from difficult backgrounds. She could see the fear in their eyes that reminded her of her own childhood, and she knew exactly how to comfort them. During her final year of medical school, Emma met David, a kind young man who was studying to be a teacher. He was patient and understanding, and he didn't judge Emma for her background. They fell in love slowly, and David became the first person Emma truly trusted with her heart since her parents had left her. After years of hard work, Emma finally became a doctor specializing in children's health. She was 28 years old, and she had achieved her dream. She decided to return to Millbrook, the same town where she had grown up in the children's home. She wanted to help the community that had shaped her. Emma opened a small clinic on the main street of Millbrook. Many of her patients were from poor families who couldn't afford expensive medical care at the big hospitals in nearby cities. She remembered what it felt like to worry about money. So she made her care affordable for everyone. Don't worry about the cost, Emma would tell worried parents who brought their sick children to her. Every child deserves to be healthy and happy. She would often treat children for free when she knew their families were struggling. Emma also started a charity called Second Chances to help struggling families in the community. She used her own money and raised funds from local businesses to build playgrounds where children could play safely. She provided school supplies for children whose parents couldn't afford them. And she even opened another children's home for kids who needed temporary care while their families got back on their feet. Emma married David, and they had two beautiful children together, his son named Jack and a daughter named Sophie. She was a loving mother who made sure her children always felt wanted and secure. She would tell them bedtime stories and tuck them in every night, giving them the childhood she had always wished for. But despite all her success and the good she was doing, Emma still felt an empty space in her heart. She often wondered about James and Mary, her birth parents who had left her all those years ago. She wondered if they were still alive, if they ever thought about her, and if they knew what she had become. Emma was now 45 years old and well known throughout England for her work helping children and families. Her charity, Second Chances, had grown from a small local organization into something that helped thousands of families across the country. She had opened 15 children's homes and 20 medical clinics in different towns and cities. Newspapers wrote articles about her work, and she had even received awards from the Queen herself at Buckingham Palace on this particular Tuesday morning. Emma was sitting in her clinic in Millbrook, reviewing patient files as she did every week. She was reading about a little boy named Peter who needed surgery, when her assistant, Mrs. Jenkins, knocked softly on the door. Mrs. Jenkins was a cheerful woman who had worked with Emma for over 10 years and knew her. "Well, Dr. Emma, there's a gentleman here to see you," Mrs. Jenkins said, looking a bit uncertain. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's very important. He seems quite serious." Emma looked up from her papers, wondering who it could be. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her afternoon was already full of patients to see. "Did he say what it's about?" she asked. "No, but he said his name is Mr. William Harris and that he's a private investigator. He's been traveling for several hours to get here." Emma's heart began to beat a little faster. A private investigator. She couldn't imagine why someone like that would want to see her. She had never done anything wrong, and her charity work was all legal and proper. "Please send him in," she said, trying to stay calm. The man who entered her office was tall and thin, with kind grey eyes and a gentle manner. He wore a dark suit and carried a brown leather briefcase. He looked tired, as if he had been traveling for a long time. Emma gestured for him to sit in the chair across from her desk. Dr. Emma, he said softly. My name is Mr. William Harris, and I'm a private investigator. I've been hired to find you, and I have some news that might be quite shocking. Emma's hands began to tremble slightly. She placed them flat on her desk to steady them. What kind of news? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harris opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. It's about your father, James, he said gently, watching Emma's face carefully. Emma felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. She hadn't heard those names, James and Mary, spoken aloud in decades. For a moment, she couldn't speak at all. Her mind raced back to that rainy night 37 years ago, when she had watched the blue car disappear into the darkness. My father, she finally managed to say. But I haven't seen him since I was 8 years old. How do you even know about him? Mr. Harris leaned forward in his chair, his expression full of compassion. Your father has been looking for you for over 20 years. He said slowly, he hired me 6 months ago because he's very ill now and staying at Riverside Care Home, about 2 hours from here. The doctors say he doesn't have much time left. Emma felt dizzy. She gripped the edge of her desk to steady herself, looking for me. But why now? Where has he been all these years? Mr. Harris opened the folder and began to explain what he had learned during his investigation. Emma's parents had struggled with serious addiction problems when she was young. They had been using drugs and drinking heavily, and they had no money and no stable place to live. That's why they had to give her up. They knew they couldn't take care of her properly in their condition. It wasn't that they didn't love you, Mr. Harris said carefully. They loved you so much that they made the hardest decision parents can make. They gave you up so you could have a better life than they could provide. After leaving Emma at Sunshine Home, James and Mary had worked incredibly hard to get clean and build better lives. They went to treatment programs, found jobs, and got married properly. Mary worked as a cleaning lady at a hospital, and James got a job fixing cars at a garage. They lived quietly and saved every penny they could. But by the time they were ready to try to find you and perhaps be part of your life again, you had already left the children's home system, Mr. Harris explained. You were 18 and had gone to university. The home couldn't give them information about where you had gone because of privacy laws. They never stopped searching. Emma learned that her mother, Mary, had died 3 years earlier from cancer. She had fought the disease bravely for 2 years, but in the end, it was too strong. Her last words to James were asking him to never stop looking for their daughter. She wanted to know if Emma was happy and safe, even if they never met again. Your father has used all his savings trying to find you, Mr. Harris said softly. He has boxes and boxes of newspaper clippings about your work. Every time your name appeared in a paper or magazine, he would cut it out and save it. He's been so proud of you from afar, watching you become the amazing woman you are today. Emma sat in stunned silence. All these years, she had thought her parents had simply abandoned her and forgotten about her. She had imagined them living somewhere, not caring what had happened to the little girl they had left behind. Now she learned they had been carrying the pain of separation just as she had, and they had never stopped loving her. Emma stood outside Riverside Care Home for nearly 30 minutes, unable to move. She had driven the 2 hours from Millbrook without stopping, but now that she was here, her legs felt like they were made of stone. Her successful, confident exterior crumbled as she faced the door to room 15, her father's room. The number seemed to glow in the dim hallway light. She had been a doctor for many years and had walked into thousands of hospital rooms, but this felt completely different. Her hands shook as she held the small bouquet of flowers she had bought at the hospital gift shop. They were simple yellow daisies, the kind her mother Mary used to pick from the roadside when Emma was very small. Finally, after taking several deep breaths, she knocked gently on the door and stepped inside. The room was small and clean, with pale green walls and a single window that looked out onto a garden. The man lying in the bed was thin and frail, much smaller than she remembered from her childhood memories. His hair was completely white now, and his face was lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were the same kind blue eyes she remembered from childhood. They were the eyes that had looked at her with love when he read her bedtime stories, the eyes that had been filled with tears on that terrible rainy night 37 years ago. When he saw her standing in the doorway, tears began streaming down his weathered face. "Emma," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with wonder. "My little girl, is it really you?" Emma's own tears started flowing before she could stop them. For a moment, she was 8 years old again, standing on those cold stone steps. "Hello, Dad," she managed to say through her tears, her voice shaking. James struggled to sit up in his bed, his thin arms trembling with the effort. Emma quickly rushed to help him, adjusting his pillows and making sure he was comfortable. Her doctor training took over for a moment, checking to see if he was in pain or needed anything. For a moment, they just looked at each other. 45 years of separation hanging between them like a heavy curtain. Emma could see her own face reflected in his features, the same nose, the same shape of the eyes, the same stubborn chin that had helped her survive all those difficult years. "I'm so sorry," James said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Not a day has passed that I didn't think about you and wonder if you were safe and happy. I prayed every night that you would have a good life, even if I couldn't be part of it." Emma felt anger, sadness, and love all mixing together in her heart like ingredients in a complicated recipe. The 8-year-old inside her wanted to shout and ask why he had left her. The adult she had become understood that life was more complicated than a child could understand. "Why didn't you come back for me?" she asked, voicing the question she had carried since childhood. James reached for a wooden box on his bedside table with shaking hands. Emma helped him lift it onto his lap. Inside were hundreds of items, newspaper clippings about Emma's medical achievements, photos he had somehow obtained over the years, and letters he had written but never sent. The box was organized carefully, with everything sorted by date. "Your mother and I were so young and so lost," he explained, his fingers touching the items in the box gently. "We were homeless, addicted to drugs, and barely surviving. We knew that keeping you would have meant watching you suffer with us. We had no food, no safe place to sleep, no way to take care of you properly. Giving you up was the hardest thing we ever did, but we thought it was the most loving choice we could make." He showed her letter after letter he had written over the years. Emma read them with trembling hands. "Happy 16th birthday. Emma, I hope you're doing well in school and that someone is helping you with your homework. Congratulations on graduating university. I saw your picture in the paper and cried with joy. I'm so proud of the doctor you've become. Your mother would be so happy to see you helping children." Each letter was written in careful handwriting, as if James had spent a long time choosing each word. Some letters were stained with what looked like tears. Emma realized that while she had been growing up feeling abandoned, her father had been writing to her in his heart every year. Emma learned that her parents had gotten clean from drugs within 2 years of leaving her at the children's home. They had found jobs and lived quietly, always hoping someday they might be reunited with their daughter. Mary had worked as a nurse's aide at a small hospital, inspired by hoping Emma was somewhere being cared for medically. James had become a carpenter, building homes and hoping Emma had found a loving family. "We donated money to your charity for years," James admitted, looking embarrassed. "We used fake names because we didn't want to interfere with your life. But we wanted to support your work. Every time we read about another clinic opening or another child being helped, we felt proud that our daughter was making the world better." As the days passed, Emma visited her father every day after work. They shared stories, looked at old photos of her as a baby, and slowly began to heal the wounds of their long separation. Each visit brought new understanding and forgiveness. Emma brought her husband David and her children, Jack and Sophie, to meet their grandfather the following week. She was nervous about how her children would react to meeting this stranger who was their family. Jack was 12 years old and Sophie was 10, and they had never known they had a grandfather still alive. James was overjoyed to learn he had grandchildren, despite his illness and the tubes connected to his arms. His face lit up whenever they visited. His eyes would sparkle with happiness, and he would try to sit up straighter in his bed. The children were shy at first, hiding behind their mother. But James was patient and gentle with them. "Grandpa James, tell us about when Mummy was little," Sophie would say, climbing carefully onto his bed after a few visits. She was a curious child with the same blue eyes as her grandfather, and she loved hearing stories. James would share gentle stories about baby Emma. He told them how she loved butterflies and would chase them round their tiny garden. He described how she would giggle when he made funny faces at her during breakfast. He talked about how she had a special blanket that she carried everywhere, and how she would hum little songs to herself while playing. She was the most beautiful baby in the world, James would say, his voice full of love. She had tiny fingers that would grab onto mine, and she would smile at me like I was the most important person in her life. She was loved so much, even though we couldn't stay together. Jack, who was usually quiet and serious like his mother, began to warm up to his grandfather. He would ask questions about what life was like when his mother was young. James told him about the old blue car, about how they lived in a small flat, and about how much he and Mary had dreamed of giving him a better life. During his final weeks, James grew weaker each day. The nurses had to help him eat, and he slept most of the time. But when Emma and her family visited, he would wake up and smile. He seemed at peace, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I can die happy now," he told Emma one quiet evening when they were alone in his room. The children were at home doing their homework. David was parking the car. "I know you turned out to be an amazing woman. Your mother would be so proud of the doctor you became, the family you built, and all the children you've helped." Emma held his thin hand in hers and told him about all the things she had accomplished. She described her clinics, her charity work, and how she had never forgotten the promise she made as a scared 8-year-old. James listened with tears in his eyes, squeezing her hand weakly. When James passed away peacefully in his sleep on a Tuesday morning, Emma found his personal journal beside his bed. The nurses said he had been writing in it every day for years. Emma opened it carefully and discovered that every entry for the past 25 years included a prayer for Emma's happiness and success. Some entries were short, just a few lines, while others were longer letters he had written to her but never sent Dot at the funeral. Emma met several people who had known her parents over the years. There was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had worked with Mary at the hospital. There was Mr. Roberts, who had worked alongside James at the carpentry shop. They shared stories of James and Mary's quiet generosity over the years. "Your parents helped so many struggling families," Mrs. Patterson told Emma after the service. "They would bring food to people who had no money, help pay bills for families in trouble, and always say they hoped someone was helping their daughter. Somewhere, They never talked much about their past, but they were the kindest people I ever knew. Mr. Roberts nodded in agreement. Your father built a playground for the community center for free, he said, when I asked him why. He said he hoped his daughter had safe places to play wherever she was. Emma realized that her parents had spent their entire adult lives trying to become the people they wished they had been when she was young. They had turned their pain into purpose, just as she had done. They had helped other families because they couldn't help their own daughter. Inspired by their story and wanting to honor their memory, Emma decided to establish something special. She used money from her charity and donations from the community to create the James and Mary Memorial Family Support Center. It was a place where struggling parents could get help with addiction problems, housing assistance, and childcare support so families could stay together instead of being separated. The center opened 6 months after James's funeral. It was housed in a beautiful building that had once been an old school. Emma made sure it had comfortable rooms where families could meet with counselors, a playroom for children, and even a small apartment where families could stay temporarily. While getting back on their feet at the opening ceremony, Emma spoke to a crowd of families, social workers, and community leaders. She stood at a podium in the main room, looking out at all the faces of people who wanted to help families in crisis. My parents made an incredibly difficult choice 45 years ago, she said, her voice strong and clear. They gave me up because they loved me too much to let me suffer with them. Today, I want to honor their memory by making sure other families get the support they need to stay together. No child should have to go through what I went through if there's another way. The end.